The rubber jig. Say those words to any serious bass angler and you will get a nod of respect. This is quite simply the most influential, most used, and most productive lure in the history of bass fishing. It is not just a tool, it defined the core logic of how we target big bass in heavy cover. And if you are looking to unlock bigger fish and break your personal best, this is the bait that will do it. So why is the rubber jig the undisputed king of bass fishing? It comes down to one thing: it cracked the code on a big bass's primary food source. Crawfish are the #1 year-round forage item for bass. Studies show that crawfish make up 60 to 80% of a big bass's diet. And the jig does not just look like a crawfish, it behaves like one. The magic is in the skirt. From the moment a jig hits the bottom, those silicone or rubber strands flare out and pulse naturally, a perfect imitation of a crawfish spreading its claws in a defensive posture. When the jig hops, the skirt collapses and then reflares on the fall, exactly matching how a startled crawfish tucks its claws and drops back down. When the jig sits still on the bottom, water flows through the skirt and every single strand moves independently. That micro-movement, that fine, subtle action, triggers a bass's attention far more effectively than the broad wobble of any hard bait ever could. But here is the thing. The visual illusion only gets the bass to notice the jig. What makes the fish actually commit is the behavior. The jig's 4 core retrieves map directly to the 4 natural behaviors of a crawfish. Behavior 1, the free fall. When you let the jig sink on a slack line, it drops exactly like a crawfish that just lost its grip on a rock or a weed stalk and is falling through the water column. This is the deadliest presentation of all. Over half of all jig strikes happen on that initial fall. Behavior 2, the bottom crawl. Slowly dragging the jig head along the bottom with the skirt trailing behind perfectly mimics a crawfish walking across the substrate. This is the most effective presentation in cold water and during low activity periods. Behavior 3, the short hop. A sharp upward twitch of the rod tip makes the jig pop up 10 to 20 centimeters off the bottom and then fall back down. That is a crawfish startled backward and trying to flee. Behavior 4, the shimmy. Rapid, tiny rod tip shakes make the jig vibrate in place without moving forward, the exact posture of a crawfish rearing up with its claws raised in a threat display. When the bass gets close, the tactile and auditory cues finish the job. When that jig head bounces off a rock or taps the bottom, the clacking sound is the signature of a crawfish's hard shell moving. At that moment the bass inhales the jig. The soft skirt material fills the fish's mouth and masks the feel of the hook, which is why bass hold a jig so much longer than any hard bait and why your hookup ratio skyrockets. Now let us address the question every curious angler asks: why does the jig consistently catch bigger bass than other lures? This is not coincidence. It is biology. A 1-pound bass eats minnows, insects, and small shrimp, so it responds well to jerkbaits, spinnerbaits, and other baitfish imitating lures. But a 3-pound or larger bass shifts its diet toward higher calorie, more efficient prey, crustaceans. In most bodies of water, crawfish dominate the diet of bigger bass. And then there is the habitat factor. 5-pound-plus giant bass share one common trait: they almost never leave heavy cover. They live in impenetrable weed beds, submerged tree roots, rock piles, bridge pilings, and dock shadows. These places are their fortresses. And what else lives in that exact same cover? Crawfish. The jig's bullet-shaped head and weed guard let it slip through grass, slide over wood, and dance through rock without hanging up, something no other hard bait can do consistently. The hunting style difference between small bass and big bass is another piece of the puzzle. Small bass are chasers, they will pursue a fast-moving baitfish imitation across open water. Big bass are ambush predators. They sit in the shadows, tucked behind structure, waiting for prey to come to them. The bigger the bass, the smarter it is about calculating whether a meal is worth the energy. A jig's slow, deliberate retrieve, the crawl, the hop, the pause, fits the ambush profile of a giant bass perfectly. Big bass are also far more cautious than small ones. When a big bass picks up a prey item, it evaluates it. If it feels anything wrong, a hard plastic shell, a sharp hook point, metallic resistance, it spits it out instantly. But with a jig, the hook point is completely buried inside the skirt, and the weed guard sits above it. The first thing the bass's mouth contacts is the soft, giving material of the skirt. Even when the weed guard brushes the fish's mouth, the bass interprets it as the shell of a crawfish. The entire process feels natural, so the bass commits and swallows the whole bait. The rejection rate is under 10%. And the whole time, that window where the bass is chewing, repositioning, confirming the meal is real, lasts 1 to 3 seconds. That gives you all the time you need to set the hook. This is why new anglers lose fish on hard baits constantly, but their hookup ratio with a jig is dramatically better. The jig is also the true year-round, any conditions bait. Cold water, hot water, clear, muddy, shallow, deep, the jig produces. Now let us talk about choosing the right jig. The 3 key variables are weight, color, and trailer. Weight first. Heavier jigs sink faster, punch through grass better, and transmit more bottom feedback to your hands. In clear water with active fish, start with a 7 to 14 gram jig, roughly a quarter to half an ounce. Lighter jigs, 2 to 5 grams, are for finesse presentations, light cover, or pressured fish. They sink slower, hop and fall with a more delicate action, and can be shaken in place with lifelike subtlety. For spooky, heavily pressured bass, the light jig is often the answer. Now color. Jig color selection is refreshingly straightforward. On sunny days in clear water, go with natural tones like green pumpkin or brown. On cloudy days or in stained to muddy water, switch to solid, high-contrast colors like black and blue, or dark red. The logic is the same as any soft plastic. Clear water demands a natural look, while dirty water demands a bold silhouette. And now the trailer, the most important piece of the puzzle. You can pair almost any soft plastic with a jig, but the craw-style trailer is the standard for a reason. The jig body alone gives you the soul of a crawfish, but the craw-style trailer completes the visual profile by adding the claws and the abdomen. When the jig sits on the bottom, the skirt flares and the craw trailer's claws curl upward naturally, a dead match for a crawfish in its defensive posture. On the fall, the claws fold back and the trailer undulates, exactly like a crawfish tucking and dropping. The broad profile and dual claw movement create a silhouette that the fish cannot ignore. The craw trailer is the secret weapon behind every truly giant jig base. What rod should you choose for jig fishing? This is critical. Here is the short answer: a fast or extra fast action baitcasting rod, 6 foot 6 to 7 feet long, in medium heavy or heavy power. The jig demands more from your rod than any other base lure. Get the wrong stick and you will cast poorly, feel nothing, miss strikes, fail to penetrate the fish's mouth, and constantly lose fish in cover. Here is why. First, casting accuracy. Jig fishing is about precision placement, not distance. The 20-meter zone is where the jig dominates. The weight is concentrated in the head, and a fast-action rod transmits casting energy directly to that head with zero lag. Pitching, flipping, and sidearm roll casts are the core jig casting techniques, and they all depend on a rod tip that loads and unloads crisply. Second, control. The micro-movements, the shimmy, the short hop, the slow crawl, the pause, require a rod that transmits every nuance of your hand to the bait with no delay. A fast-action rod gives you one-to-one response. When you shake the rod tip, the jig vibrates in place instantly, maybe 1 or 2 centimeters of movement, perfectly mimicking a crawfish's defensive tail wag. And the bottom feel through a fast rod is exceptional. You can distinguish between a rock, a sand bottom, a weed stalk, and a submerged log, and that information tells you exactly what the jig is doing at all times. Third, strike detection. In cold water or on high-pressure lakes, a bass will often just gently suck in the trailer and then spit it. That bite is whisper subtle. A fast-action rod transmits that signal with almost no loss. Many times a bass will mouth the jig once as a test before committing. A fast rod lets you feel that probe and get ready for the real eat. Fourth, the hook set. Jig hooks are thick gauge, buried in the skirt, with a weed guard on top. Driving that hook home requires serious force. A fast rod with a strong backbone transfers every bit of your power directly to the hook point, punching through even the toughest upper jaw of a giant bass. And once that fish is hooked, you have to pull it out of heavy cover immediately, or it will wrap you up and break you off. The fast rod's power locks the fish down and drags it out before it even knows what happened. The rubber jig represents the essence of bass fishing. It is not about catching more fish, it is about catching bigger fish. That is why so many bass anglers will tell you, when you truly learn the jig, that is when you truly start to understand bass fishing. If you want to unlock your first 50-pound class bag or your next personal best, save this information and come back to it before your next trip. And if you have any questions about jig fishing or anything else bass fishing related, drop them in the comments below.